Welcome to XYPN Radio, where your host Alan Moore brings you into a community of fee-only financial planners who want to profitably and successfully serve Gen X and Gen Y clients. If you're ready to get the knowledge you need from leaders in your field, learn from forward-thinking advisors, and take action on your own goals, XYPN Radio is the show for you. Here's your host.
Hello and welcome to this episode of XYPN Radio. I'm your host, Alan Moore, and I'm excited to have XYPN member Diana Bacon, founder of Bacon Financial Management, on the show today. Diana started her career at ACO, a firm well known for their expertise in executive compensation planning. She eventually moved to Ernst & Young after deciding that she wanted to be fee-only. Then, after a short stint at an independent firm, she ultimately launched her own firm, which she admits maybe wasn't the best decision at the time, but worked out fantastically. She has her MBA, CFP, and CDFA, and has done a lot of property settlement planning for female clients going through a divorce, which was a topic that we talked quite a bit about. A few years ago, she actually merged her firm with an older advisor's firm in her local community and now serves as a partner and succession plan for him as he phases into retirement. Diana works with a lot of same-sex couples that she meets through her volunteer work at her church and gave a lot of awesome advice around being authentic and working with clients that you just love working with. Missed calls or missed opportunities. Don't miss the chance to connect or bring on a new client. With Ruby, all your calls are answered live by a team of friendly, professional, remote receptionists, helping you win more clients and build trust. Let Ruby help you turn rings into relationships. For a special offer, visit callruby.com/XYPN and use promo code XYPN or call them at 1-844-853-7829. You can find any of the additional resources that we mentioned during the episode at xyplanningnetwork.com/144. Also, be sure to go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to join our private group just for XYPN Radio listeners. It's the community of advisors we've all been looking for that's there to provide support when we need it the most. Best of all, it's free. I encourage you to check it out. Again, that's xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP. Without further ado, here's my interview with Diana. Hey, Diana, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being on.
Oh, I'm excited to be on.
So Maddie, as part of our new, what we call our member engagement service rollout, Maddie and her new team are talking to all of our members. And so it's been really great because sort of reconnecting with everyone, hearing more about their stories. It's been awesome because she's able to shoot me a note and say, hey, you have to have Diana on the show because she has this rock star story and just really cool path that she's gone down. So I love it when she does that because these episodes always end up being awesome because she got to talk to you for an hour and learn more. So I appreciate you taking the time. So I guess just to sort of give listeners a bit of an overview, sort of where things are today, can you tell me a little bit about your practice, number of clients, if you have a niche focus and that sort of thing? Then we'll dig into all the details sort of as we go.
Okay, sure. Yeah. So, we're a small RIA. We focus on financial planning. So right now we have about 55 households, and there are some cases where we're working with parents and children, some trusts in there. There's two planners, me and my partner, and then we have two support staff. So of those 55, I have about 39 of them, so almost 40. So my partner is further along in his career, not taking on new clients. And I've been fortunate to keep adding clients every year, knowing that honestly, probably in the next few years, I'm going to top out and I'll have a chance to really help my paraplanner grow. So we do the investment work, we do all that, but our main focus is the financial planning. I have a income tax planning background purely because of the firms that I came from and kind of grew up in. So that allows me to really dig in deeper with like employee stock options or self-employed people and making sure that they're benefiting from whatever the current tax law is, because we had changes last year, which made my life fun.
Absolutely. Keeps us all in business.
Absolutely. I mean, it's a good place to be when you're the most popular person in your client's eyes.
Awesome. So you said you have a bit of an income tax background. So was that sort of the start of your career coming out of college? Did you start on the tax side of the business?
Well, sort of. So the firm I started out with did comprehensive planning for executives. And it's interesting because a lot of financial planners started, at brokerage houses, and they come from the investment side and then found financial planning. And I started out doing financial planning. It was the ACO company, and they were mostly attorneys. Some of us were MBAs, but that's all we did was the financial planning. And since we were working with executives, there were non-qualified stock options. There were still a lot of incentive stock options back then. So dealing with a lot of AMT, state income tax issues, as executives were bouncing between states. So all of that planning, because if you're going to work with people with specialized income issues, you need to be able to walk them through it and help them plan their estimated tax payments. And when I started this, the estate tax exemption was low. It was $600,000. So we did a lot of gifting planning and estate planning, really focused on that tax side.
Makes sense. There's a ton of opportunity, especially when we actually had an estate tax that a lot of families were hitting instead of just a few hundred a year.
Oh, exactly. I mean, here in Texas, I'm in Dallas, client, you look at it and you're like, okay, well, your home has grown to $1 million in value. Just that, we have an estate tax issue. And they'd be shocked.
Right.
Like, we are not rich. And I'm like, well, because well, that's subjective, but because it hadn't been indexed for so long, it was like the AMT when that wasn't being indexed, you were getting people who are like, but we're just average people. And you're like, okay, but you still have to deal with this issue. Like, I get how you feel, and this should be pushed off on other people, but it is affecting you.
It's actually a really interesting point that so many of us end up working with clients that don't associate with being wealthy, even if they are. Because they always show like the more money you have, the more money it takes for you to feel wealthy. And for a lot of people, myself included, having $1 million in the bank would make me feel wealthy. And yet you have these clients at the time that have, $1 million in wealth and don't feel wealthy because they're just not where they want to be. So it is an interesting point that I think a lot of advisory firms market themselves to high net worth individuals. And yet the high net worth individuals don't believe they're high net worth because they think only people that are richer than them are high net worth. It's just sort of an interesting, reality that we deal with.
Well, and, I work with a lot of women, and I see this more so with my female clients. I refer to it as the bag lady syndrome, where their greatest fear financially is becoming the bag lady. And I mean, I have sat in front of female clients and, I have their net worth statement, which is my greatest tool, I think, and pointing them to the fact that they actually, because of how they live their lives, are not capable of spending all the money on the sheets. And they still are like, but what if I live to be 80? And we've already gone through the cash flows. We've already gone through all the projections and illustrations, and I've shown that we're looking at it conservatively. But that is such a huge mental hurdle for so many people. But I do see it more with women. But for them to really get over and get their brains wrapped around it.
Yeah, I remember part of my process, and it wasn't intentional, but one of the first things I did sort of after a discovery meeting was show clients their net worth statement. And I remember it was more, to me, was just educational, like, here's where you're at. And I remember just the shock that people had when they saw their net worth statement, because no one builds a personal balance sheet for themselves. No one actually knows what they're worth. And there was always this like, whoa, how did we get here, in a positive way? Like, how do I have $700,000? Like, I have, $50,000 in the bank. And it's like, well, this is what happens when we put everything on one sheet. And it was a real eye opener. And I think, for some clients helped open their eyes to the possibilities, and, to others can in a way shut them down because it almost changes their identity. Maybe that, they have to associate with being wealthy, and they don't associate with being wealthy, and, that fear crops up. So it's an interesting thing, just depending on the type of client that you're working with, how you frame that discussion. I always could say, like, congratulations, like, you've done awesome. You may not be able to say that, right? You may have to, you're going to approach that same conversation differently because of the clients that you're working with.
Right. Well, and, it's the same with that net worth statement, and they're really seeing that snapshot of who they are financially. But you have the same conversation when you sit down in front of someone and go, so we've ran through your standard of living and your assets, and by the way, you're financially independent. Like, that conversation also can be really hard for some clients to hear, which who wouldn't want to hear that? But But no, I mean, just them getting their head around, that bottom line in the net worth statement or reaching financial independence. Yeah, you're right. That's a hurdle that some people just, they make themselves trip over. I mean, yeah.
I wish we could have financial independence parties, like we do retirement parties and graduation parties. And no one would do it because they're afraid of their friends finding out they're financial independent. Like it would be hard for them to get people to come to the party. But, like that's a celebration. It is an exciting point in your life where you can say, I'm done. Like I'm done having to do something that I don't want to do, which is just such an amazing feeling. I hope. I'm not there yet. I hope it's an amazing feeling.
Yeah, but I mean, I've been doing this long enough that I've got to say that for multiple people, and some people just keep go on working, and they're one of my clients, he worked for another 8 years doing like heavy travel consulting, and I'm like, good for him. That's obviously, he always questioned whether or not he had a passion with that. Well, since he knew he could walk in and use some choice words with his boss if he wanted to, but no, he could, but he chose to keep doing it. And then I've seen other clients, really wind down things within 6 months and go start foundations or become a college professor. It's really cool. One thing about our jobs is it's cool to watch people live their lives, not to nerd out too much, but also knowing that, we had a hand in that. So I love that.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
I think that's the most amazing part of this profession is that we get the honor of helping people actually accomplish their dreams. Not very many other people can say that. So you worked at ACO, which is known as like the premier, or at least my understanding is like it's the premier executive compensation firm. Like if I was an executive with compensation like that, I'm going to ACO. So can you just tell me about what it was like learning executive compensation, just in terms of how to do planning around that? Or were there any certifications or designations, or was it all in-house training? Because I mean, that is some complex stuff they don't cover in CFP school.
Right. So I actually did all of that training before I got my CFP. So ACO does everything in-house. So they have their own in-house training staff who does all of their policy setting. So the technical people are the ones training the new financial planners and staff attorneys. And they have an extensive, or they did back then, year-long program they called ACO U in Albany, New York. So I was up there in Albany and got to benefit from that. And it was intensive, and they did a great job training me and training the rest of the folks. And then they sent us out to the regions, which is actually why I'm in Dallas, Texas. So then once you're in the region, then they really like advanced degrees there. If you have a CFP or a CPA, that's a benefit. But ACO is just one of those firms. They like the degrees a little more than the designations. And unfortunately, you don't have to have the CFP designation to do financial planning.
Right. So it's easy to go a different direction.
Right. So at ACO, they did a lot of that training in-house. And I was at ACO at a really cool time in their history. Now they're owned by Goldman Sachs. And, which I think Goldman Sachs, just like you said, ACO is a premier company, and Goldman Sachs like that little badge of honor to have them under their umbrella.
Sure.
But so I was at ACO right between when American Express had sold them back to the partners, and I left right before Goldman bought them. I was starting to realize, I was about 5 years into my career, and I was starting to see the writing on the wall that I really wanted to do fee only, and ACO has fees and commissions. And so to be able to keep going where I wanted my career to go, I did have to leave. So, which has turned out great.
Yeah. So what was it, just out of curiosity, I mean, what was it about fee only that attracted you to leave, premier firm? You've got a great job. I'm sure you're making great money. Could have continued a career there, climbed the ladder. So so it must have been a pretty big pull to pull you away from that. That, as we like to say, it's hard to get out of a warm bed. So.
Right. Yeah. And honestly, when I left ACO, I went to Ernst Young and joined a practice. A lot of ex-ACO people. Most of us had the same story. We were really attracted to the fee-only side because, putting a disclosure in front of a client, even when that, this life insurance policy, for instance, is the exact right answer for this client. They should buy it. It's going to benefit them. It's what their family needs. But you're putting that disclosure in front of them because you've charged the fee for the advice and now you're selling the policy. And, some people, because you're doing what's right for the client, there's not an ick factor. They're like, it's fine. I know I'm doing what's right for the client, but I had the ick factor. And I didn't know how to reconcile the fact that I knew I was doing what was right for clients. I knew my advice would benefit from them. It was providing value. And I wasn't coming from a place where I'm going to get another commission off this, but it just wasn't working with me. So I've joked many times in my career where, I could be making more money if I was getting commissions too, but I'm okay. I'd rather give on that extra income and feel really good about all of the advice I give.
And just never having to think about it. Even you can always commit to working in your client's best interest and still sell them insurance. Listeners have heard me say many times, selling insurance does not make you a bad person. But there is always that thought of, am I doing this for the client? Like, am I sure this is the best thing for the client? And those of us that manage investments with on AUM, like, yes, we have to have that same thought of, okay, am I having them roll over, this IRA or this from the 401k because it's in their best interest, or am I, doing this for me? So everyone has to deal with that at times, but it is a nice thing to not have to have that thought. So you left ACO. Did you have clients that were sort of yours, or are they clients of the firm? So you went to, you say Ernst Young, sort of solo, if you will?
Yeah, all the ACO clients of the firm. And I was still assisting the vice presidents with their clients. So I started off at Ernst Young just with a clean slate, and they were desperate for people to come in who'd had experience with, the corporate execs. And I rolled over there at a, fun time for me, not fun time for these clients. But there were so many companies going through big reduction in force programs. And so, they would contract with Ernst & Young for financial planning for 1 year, 3 years, whatever, to make sure that these executives landed on their feet. And honestly, that provided me a really good client base when I did leave and start my own practice. I still have some of those clients. So I've seen kids like go off to college and graduate college, and they started businesses. So so that's really where I worked with a lot of very different clients going through very different things in their lives.
Makes sense. So were you responsible for business development there, or were they sort of handing you the clients because someone else is doing sort of the business development side?
They were absolutely handing me the clients. There was zero business development. And, I really struggled with business development. I probably still really struggled with business development, to be honest. And it was probably because of the type of firms that I grew up in, because I wasn't responsible for business development. There wasn't any discussion like that since the partners in the firm were responsible for going out and getting these big contracts, so they would just hand you, 10 clients to go see. So once I was out on my own, it took me a long time to figure out even how to start the business development process, how to build a pipeline, how to bring in the clients. I think that was the biggest hurdle once I started my practice and try to figure out, how am I going to do this? And I loved having my own practice, but wow, that was a big one. And I still struggle with it.
Yeah, I would say if we polled XY members, and probably if we polled advisors in general, that would be the number one issue that they face, is just how to do business development, how to do sales, and actually prospect in a non creepy way that actually brings in clients and clients you want to be working with. Can you tell me a little bit about your educational progression? Because you have a couple of letters after your name now, and just sort of the order in which you got various designations sort of through your career.
Sure. So I got my MBA in corporate finance here as soon as I moved to Dallas. I got my MBA. My undergrad is in mathematics, pure theory, so much more on the sciencey side. I, for a while, thought I was going into academia. So I wanted that solid business background to make sure that, The net worth, you mentioned it before, it's really just a personal balance sheet. So I wanted to make sure, okay, the two most fundamental documents, the balance sheet and the income statement. Okay, once we pull up the personal side, it's just the net worth and cash flows, long-term cash flows. So I wanted to make sure that I had a good, solid understanding of those. As I started seeing clients, I realized I did want the CFP designation. I wanted something that kind of announced to the world, this is really my profession. It is a profession. I have qualifications, and it's a lot of work to get the CFP. And I took the exam back when it was still on paper, and it was a couple of days. And I still remember, like, wow, I don't know if all those classes and all that coursework really prepared me, but it did. I passed the test the first time, which a couple of my friends taking it didn't, but that's okay. They finally came around on that. But so I did that. So that was, 15 years ago, and really glad I got the CFP designation. And then I also, maybe 3 years ago, added the CDFA designation, which is the Certified Divorce Financial Analyst. And I, just by nature of working with clients, I've worked on a number of divorces. So really helped with the property settlements. And in Texas, we have our own way of doing things.
No, not in Texas.
Oh my goodness. Our divorce law keeps me on my toes, but it is interesting. I would say it's fun. Obviously not a fun time in the client's life, one of the worst times in their life. But, I was on like my 25th property settlement I worked on. And one of the,
wow.
Yeah. And one of the attorneys that I worked with off and on recommended that I look into that designation. He was like, you could charge me more for work if you had this designation. I'm like, I would love to charge you more for this work. So I found out it was a series of tests. And because I knew divorce in Texas really well and divorce outside of Texas moderately, I knew what questions to ask and how to find someone that knew more than I did. Sure. It was a great process because I got to see, what's going on in the rest of the country and in other states. So it really just, peeling it down to being able to do that work and provide the best advice for my clients in these cases. I'm really glad I did that designation because it did expand my knowledge. But again, I hate taking tests. I get terrible test anxiety. So that was a series of 4 tests. So it was rough, but yeah, so I'm glad I did that as well.
Yeah, I mean, some listeners would know I got my CDFA as well because I wanted to do collaborative divorce work, which was a little different. I wanted to be in the middle of it instead of working with one client. Mm-hmm. And wow, that's when my ADD sort of jump into things before you know what you're doing bit me in the butt because I just jumped in, got the CDFA, and you learn a lot. I mean, I would say that, in comparison to CFP, it's not a very challenging curriculum, but it is a great curriculum, but you can learn a lot. And once you get into it, anyway, once I started working with some clients, I was like, oh, wow, I'm just going to let this one go. So fail fast. It's sort of always been my mantra. And that was a clear failure and a lot of time spent getting that designation. So I am glad it has worked out better for you than for me.
Well, and at their at the IDFA conferences, a lot of people there are doing collaborative work. And that's just one area. Like, I love learning about it and hearing about other people's experiences. But no, I knew going in that wasn't for me. Like, I want to solve the puzzle on where we try to get to with this property settlement and just do that work. I just like doing the work that I'm good at. And if I'm not a right fit, well, let's find you someone else.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and you can be an advocate for your client, which clients need, and I remember just going through the education, some of the things they had the statistics around that, in a divorce of a heterosexual couple, like generally the female wants to keep the house. And so, the male gets all of the liquidity and she's stuck with a house with equity and maybe a mortgage payment, but no liquidity. And it's that kind of conversation of having someone in this instance on her side to be able to sit down and say, look, that's fine. You're getting an equitable distribution. You're getting half of what the two of you have. However, I'm not sure this is a good idea. And here's why. And it doesn't mean you have to give up the house, but maybe there's some other ways of structuring it so that it makes more sense. And just, it's a insanely valuable service that I don't think enough people that are getting divorced are willing to pay for, but they should, because there is so much you can do.
I mean, I think the lack of people using CDFAs during divorce bears out in the statistics. Men get back to their pre-divorce standard of living typically within a couple of years. Women don't get back there. It's not just how many years, they're not getting back there. So
yeah, the poverty rates of divorced women is pretty astounding.
Yeah. So, and I think you're maybe seeing as I'm talking, the living my values and having those guide my work is very important to me. Probably a little more important than the money I'm making, though I don't mind making money. And being able to help those women, and exactly like you said, it is a hard conversation to sit down with someone and talk about their family home, where they brought their kids home from the hospital, where, their dog passed away, and telling them this is not in your best long-term interest. If you're really going to go down this road, we need to look at something different, because you're going to be stuck, and it's going to make your life harder. And if you're going to make that decision, let's make sure that you really understand every bit of it so that you're going in with your eyes open.
Yeah, very difficult conversation that, most advisors, quite honestly, aren't prepared to have. We've been trained how to deal with clients that are in a good spot, that are financially healthy, that we're helping them improve their already financially healthy lives. It's a different world when you have to work with someone who is struggling, whether that be going through a divorce or just in a financial situation that's a tough time, difficult time, that's a hard conversation to be able to walk them through. Hey, I know this is what you emotionally want, but financially it doesn't work and there's a disconnect. So we've got to find a way to make to fix that disconnect, if you will. And so I guess that's just something you learn on the job, because again, they certainly don't teach us that in CFP school. That's not a conversation we're trained to handle.
All. And unfortunately, it's a skill set that you pick up as you work with people. But this is their lives. I actually lost a client, one of my favorite families, just great people. They lost one of their children very suddenly. And it really messed with my head. I mean, I felt like I lost my flooring, and my communication with him and her was not good after I stumbled so much that it hurt that relationship and that give and take in the communication. And so they found another financial planner within a few months, just because I didn't deal with it well. So, that's still one of my big regrets, that I didn't handle it better, but I also didn't know how to handle it better. So as different clients, after that situation had really hard and terrible things come up, I'd learned a lot. So I feel like I handle it a lot better. I don't always handle it great or in the most optimal way, but we get involved in these people's lives, and it's a lot of times it's just messy.
So true. For any advisor out there that is wondering how you learn this stuff, I did go through Amy Florian's grief training. I don't know if you've ever heard of Amy, but she is just phenomenal and just has an incredible story. But she trains advisors how to handle clients and just how to help with anyone, really, but the focus is on advisory clients deal with grief. And all the way down to, she has an entire segment on what to do at a wake and what to say and how to communicate, how to not be the person that just says, "Oh, call me if you need anything," because that's what everyone says. That's not helpful. And so if advisors are looking for a training, I highly, highly recommend Amy's training, just because she has actually been through some of the worst possible scenarios and lived to tell about it. But she's just a phenomenal facilitator and trainer for advisors in learning how to deal with that.
And I learned one of the best things from Amy is when someone's crying in front of you, and, obviously everyone needs that space to feel their feelings, is have the tissues available, but don't hand them a tissue. Don't tell them you need to clean yourself up. Let them be in that space, which when I heard that in training, I was like, I thought I was being helpful. I didn't realize
Right.
what I was telling them in that, in that gesture. Yeah, her training's amazing, and what a lesson in compassion.
So true. And I remember that same piece as well. Like, what do you mean I can't hand them the tissue? And yeah, it's a great thing to think about. And you'll still do it. I catch myself doing it from time to time. Go to hand my wife a tissue and I have to be like, okay, I'm not doing this because I want you to stop crying. I'm just trying to help. And this is not helpful. And I'm sorry. So we totally went off on that topic and I love it. So I want to go back to, you decided to launch your own firm, which is a big transition. So what year did you actually go out on your own?
So after I left Ernst & Young, and again, I left Ernst & Young because our practice was being shopped and it sounded like we were going to go to a brokerage house, which I knew wouldn't be a good fit for me. And actually that wasn't the direction it wound up going. So I tried to join a small firm and it was a mismatch in the personalities, mismatch in client types. So I got out of there pretty quickly and was like, you know what though? I could do a small firm. Like I could do this. Very naively, by the way. So that was, boy, the things we tell ourselves. So that was 2006. I had, my eldest child was an infant. She was just, 4 months old. And sometimes it's good that you just don't know how dumb you are. So I was like,
I love it.
This is going to be fine. I got these, I have a small little book of business. I mean, I can do this. I mean, how hard could it be? Wow. Yeah. So I launched at the end of 2006, I had 3 clients and yeah, I was like, let's go.
I very much appreciate your honesty because, so often we talk about where we are today, 3, 5, 10 years down the line after having launched a firm. And it is so true that, launching a firm is such a stupid financial decision. Like when you really look at it, like if you sat down with your financial planner and said, hey, here's the plan. All right, I'm going to leave my good paying job and I'm going to invest all of my money into a business that has, basically a high failure rate if you're going solo, to make as much money as I was making before I left. It's going to be great. Like it does take an extra layer of like, I want to do this. Like we joke about how stupid we were, but ultimately there's something else driving us beyond just the financials that get us again out of that warm bed. Sometimes we get pushed out. Sometimes we slowly crawl out, but I think many of us would agree that we don't regret it, but I'm not sure I would want to do it again necessarily, especially when your oldest child is an infant. That adds a whole other layer of complexity.
Yeah.
So you had 3 clients. Did you have sort of a target clientele, that niche market that you were focused on, or did you have sort of, I guess, a natural network to be able to find clients?
Well, back then I would say my niche was, will you pay me a fee?
The best kind of niche.
Yeah, which, over the long run actually is not the best plan, but I did have a network. So all 3 of my clients, and I did move a couple more over from that short stop firm I'd been at. So, but I'd been working in the same like circles of executives for like 8 years by then. So once I started my own firm, I joke that really my only marketing material my entire career has been my business card. But honestly, that's all I did in that first year was try to figure out what in the world I was doing. But I just mailed out a bunch of business cards. I was like, here's my new business card. And, the firm was Bacon Financial Management. And I'm like, so obviously it's my firm. I'm doing exactly how I want to do planning. I'm not going to have to worry about, at Ernst & Young, it's a little difficult with the partners trying to meet your clients. And so I'm like, I don't have any partners trying to, sit in on a very personal meeting because they want to sell you 404 work or something of that nature. So I just reached out to the people that knew me. I did have some contacts in some of the bigger firms that didn't have exclusive deals with ACO or Ernst & Young. I had some HR contacts. So I just, was like, hey, why don't you sit down with me, just hear my story. And if there's anyone you think I can help, then I'm happy to talk to them too. So that's how I approached it. And the first few years, I wasn't trying to set the world on fire. Honestly, I had really looked at our family's finances, and I was blessed enough that my spouse made enough money that as I was, it seemed like every dollar that came in, I'm like, oh, good, now I can buy more software. So as I was bringing in more revenue every month, but I also needed things to run the business. So I wasn't, making all that much. And I did not want to bring in a bunch of new clients at the same time while, we were growing our family, because then in '08, I had another baby. So I was very kind of crazily methodical about when I brought in new clients so that I could make sure that these relationships were sticky. They weren't going anywhere. So, as I had a toddler and an infant, that it was going to be okay if everyone here got the flu, because it was just me. So I didn't focus a ton on growth. I wanted to grow just enough so that I was feeding and nurturing my business, but not so that I was setting myself up to make my life more difficult than it needed to be.
I think that's a really great point. And I commend you for thinking it through, because on our last mailbag episode, Michael and I talk about, how many clients to take on, a month or a quarter. And, some people think like good problem to have, but, in a situation like you were in, it's wise to limit your growth, because that's what your personal situation, family situation, business situation needs. That's just where things are at. So, did you have a literal, like, I will take one new client a quarter, or did you just sort of feel it out as those clients came in to sort of see what was going to make sense at the time?
I love goal setting. I'm a numbers person. I like putting things down on paper and looking at it and going back and reevaluating it, So when I did my goal setting at the beginning of every year and then reevaluated it every quarter, I would set a number, but knowing that it was probably full of it, because honestly, like one client sometimes, it's like 3 clients to really get them set up where they need to be. And they seem like they're going to be an easy client. Once you dig in, you're like, wow, okay, you're kind of a mess, but we can do this. So
right.
As much as I did set numbers, but I never beat myself up when it was the going back around and being like, you know what? I said 5 clients this year, but it was only 4, and that's okay. So, and honestly, my first year, I only added 5 clients, and I really had to remind myself that was okay, because everyone was happy. And I was providing good value for the money they were paying me. And I was doing straight retainer work. So I did flat fees, even on the investment management side. And I just had to keep reminding myself that it was more important to do my job well than, to see some big number on the growth side.
So talk to me about that initial fee structure. So you said flat fee retainer. How did you price it? Was it just the same fee for everyone and they get the full service, or is there some level of complexity calculation or something like that?
So what I did is I would sit down with, after the initial data gathering to do the engagement letter, and I would write $2,000 on a piece of paper. And that was my starting point. And really, as I realized over a couple of years, it was really based on their net worth. I didn't build it off assets under management, because I was dealing with a lot of stock options and company stock and advising on that. And I didn't ever want to be in a position where I'm working through with a client, is it a good time to exercise this grant? Where then they're thinking, but if I do that and then put it in my portfolio, now you're making more money. I was that crazy about being fee only and not taking that part of it out of the equation. So doing that flat fee. So at the end of every year, I would look at a client's next year of services. And I was actually recontracting every year back then. And it was based on the net worth. And yes, the complexity. I had a couple of clients who, had some trust in that and planning the distributions and those sort of things. So, I'd be like, well, that's going to be a little more of a pain in my backside. So let's add $1,000 onto that. So the first few years, it wasn't super methodical, but I had a good relationship with those clients. So in the cases where I really wasn't charging enough, I'd go back to them at the end of the year when we were looking at the next year and say, you know what? I told you it was going to be $5,000 probably for the next few years. You're a ton of work. And you know that because you talk to me all of the time. So it was never a shock to the clients that I went to and was like, I said $5,000, but I'm upping you to $8,000 for at least for the next year, probably for the next couple of years, because holy cow, you have a ton going on. But, once you roll out of this and this stops and, whatever was generating that, they knew that I was going to go back to them and set a fee that was appropriate and hopefully fair. But I've never really had a big problem having those conversations with clients. But it's probably because in a lot of client engagements, I don't have a problem with tooting my own horn.
So tell me about that, because confidence is a struggle for many advisors. So, so you say toot your own horn, but what does that actually sound like?
So I don't, and it's not on the performance side because, honestly, yeah, I built a portfolio and it should be solid, but there's going to be down years and that's not my fault. There's going to be up years and it's not because I'm a genius. It's because it's the market. And I always focus on the net worth statement. I've said it a couple of times so far now. To me, that's my greatest tool, especially year over year. And I don't have a problem as we're sitting down every January pointing out to a client, hey, remember when we talked about whether or not to buy this rental property and we really hashed through it and I gave you these 3 points and you did stick with them? Look at how well that's come out. Or, hey, remember how you really wanted to hold on to all of your company stock and then that company kind of tanked? Weren't we smart? And I don't make these comments on the fly. I always include them in my meeting notes to myself. I make pretty extensive meeting notes before any meeting.
That was going to be my question, is if you're tracking that in some way. So you're not just pulling it, out of your backside whenever you're in a meeting. No,
throughout the year, I keep a lot of notes in the CRM. And those are notes I add to the CRM so that as I go back through, I just scroll through the CRM and the notes and see if there's anything I need to pick up for the meeting. And I pull those out and add them into my notes because it makes that whole conversation easier, because then I'm not dealing with, well, what am I paying you for? I don't ever want to have to justify my value. I know I'm providing value, but people do forget. So those little reminders smooth out that conversation.
No, that's a great point. That so often it's sort of, what have you done for me lately? And we want to show action. We want to show the thing that we did. And sometimes it's showing like, hey, remember when we helped you not do that thing, that really stupid thing you were going to do, and we helped you to help talk you out of it? That saved you a ton of money. And that's the value that we provide, is not just the financial savings, but the peace of mind that you have someone to work with through this. Are you still around that $2,000 retainer per client, or has that gone up over time?
What's funny is, as I was like, back then I still kind of set my fees the same way, but now I start with $3,000 on the page. But even saying that, we do have a couple of monthly retainer clients that are at $1,500 a year, and I work with them. My paraplanner manages, the day-to-day of, hey, don't forget to mail in your IRA contribution, or don't forget to make your estimated tax payment. At that level, we're not doing any tax projections, but I don't mind reminding people. So even though I started a little higher, we do have some clients in that, lowest fee bracket for our firm, which is $1,500.
Okay. So it starts at $1,500, but that's if they're not utilizing the full services, $3,000-ish if they're actually utilizing the full tax services.
Yeah.
in the pre-call we talked about, before we started recording, had just talked about that you made the decision to actually take on a partner and to merge your firm. So can you talk about just the process and sort of the decision to go from solo to two advisors at the firm?
Yeah. So I'd been talking, just in the Dallas CFP circles around FPA and all that I'd be interested in taking on a partner, crazy things like I wanted to be able to go on vacation and not have to constantly monitor my
Crazy,
I know. So I put those feelers out and that kind of went in a different direction than I thought it would. So in 2013, my business partner had rolled out of a large accounting firm, and he was in his early 70s, and he was looking for a succession plan. But he wasn't ready to retire. He'd never run a really small practice, or been in a small practice. So he wanted to do that as well. Wasn't really sure what his business development was going to look like over the next few years. So we started talking in 2013, and I was a little weary. So what we actually did is I was still working out of my house and then using an executive suite for meetings. So I moved into his office in 2014, and he and I were honestly just really open with all of our clients. Hey, we're thinking of merging. What do you think? So at the beginning of 2015, I'd been doing my own compliance since I started the practice in 06, and he'd never dealt with compliance. He was outsourcing that. So he merged into my firm. And then he loved his business name, Financial Strategies Group. So we DBA'd and are currently using that. And so I'm his succession plan. Now he's 76 years old, and actually he's off traveling right now with his wife. And, so that's where we are. The nice thing is that enabled me to bring on staff, because I was doing okay, but I was using the extra year over year revenue to pay myself.
Right.
That weird thing. So what his income allowed me to do was hire a paraplanner. And I really looked for someone who wanted to be a CFP, wanted to grow, wanted to learn the industry. We have different types of support staff. Some people want to stay support staff forever, and that's fabulous. And there's absolutely a role for them. But I think the best way to learn financial planning is that apprenticeship style. And I'm probably biased because that's how I learned it. So I knew that, he's going to retire someday, and I need someone to sit in his chair. And I really think it's going to be my current paraplanner, and that's working out well. And honestly, his revenue is what's funding her salary.
Makes sense. Yeah, I learned the same way, just sitting in client meetings from day one. And that is just a wonderful way to be able to watch how it's done. You can only run so many financial plans before you sort of cap out. Like you said, there are people out there that are career back office advisors. Fantastic. Thank goodness for them. We don't hire a lot of them in smaller firms just because, we sort of get stretched and we need someone who can take on client meetings. But particularly as the firm grows, you need a set of financial planners that don't want to meet with clients, because honestly, there's only so many lead advisor roles that can be filled until the plans are actually getting done. So this is one of my big pet peeves, is that we preach the message that lead advisor is the only career path. So for the young people that are listening that say like, hey, I love financial planning, but I don't know that I want to be a lead advisor, that's okay. If you love doing the analysis, or compliance is your thing, or you love technology, or you have a gift for marketing, please stay in this profession. We need you desperately, especially if you're on the marketing side. So there's so much opportunity, but, the best way to learn, like you said, is in that apprenticeship, but also is in the small firm environment, because then you get to do a lot. You get to see a lot of different things that, your paraplanner has been exposed to probably a lot more of the compliance and technology and operations and planning than many folks that go into larger firms early in their career.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, even simple things like when we switched our CRM, her being able to hear my concerns and then see it actually play out, which when you're in a large firm, you use whatever the technology committee has picked, there's no input. So, she got to see simple things like how I manage my pipeline and my concerns about switching over to CRM, and where are my notes? Where's the information? How is that flowing from that transfer of data? So it affected how she viewed the practice and doing the job as well.
So what are you working on today? I think you said you have around 40 clients, the revenue's coming in, you have a partner that's going to be retiring at some point. What is sort of your next, I guess, iteration or evolution of the firm that you're working towards at this point?
There's kind of two parts to that. So the first is my actual, practice of financial planning in my book. So I still want to keep growing. And one thing I've just really realized over the years is I really like working with nice people. I really like working with people who live their values, who are doing something in the world, and some of them are fairly wealthy and have nice, large investment portfolios. And that's fabulous. And some of them I'm charging, the monthly retainer and they're paying me $1,500 a year. So the main focus is getting myself to where I really have what I feel is a full book of business, but that it's filled with people that I really want to work with, that if my phone rings, and not that anyone calls anymore, but they could, that if my phone rings and it's a client, that I smile when I see the name. I don't want to take on clients where I cringe when I see a name, which we've all worked with those clients over our careers, but I want to keep adding those type of people. And then for the firm, I've really enjoyed running the firm. I've enjoyed making the technology decisions, hiring. I've unfortunately had the opportunity since the merger to fire several people. I don't like that side of it at all.
It's tough. It is tough.
Oh, yeah. I had to get my husband, unfortunately, as part of his job, fires people pretty frequently. So I had some coaching from him before I did it for the first time. But, that's part of that building good quality staff piece. So, honestly, probably sometime, in the future, hopefully, far off future, I'll have to fire someone again. But I liked the adding staff. I like growing. We have a nice, vibrant financial planning community here in Dallas. And I'm really hopeful that over the next few years, I can find someone who sees client work really how I do. I think that needs to be a good fit. So I see my paraplanner growing into a lead planner role. And I wouldn't mind adding a couple of like-minded people, but I'm not trying to be one of the big firms. I like, some of the smaller firms, they build their websites to make them look bigger. I've really never had that thought because I highlight with prospects, hey, we're small. We don't have anyone else telling us what to do, and we don't have that larger structure we have to worry about. We just get to work with our clients, and we get to make sure that when we give you advice, that makes sense for you and your family. And it's not just, we're this big firm and we give this type of advice, and it's always in this manner, regardless of your personal values.
Yeah, it's a great point that it's okay to embrace who you want to be. I'm such a fan of truly being authentic and not faking it. Don't try to be somebody that you're not. And if you want to stay small and be a smaller firm, more of a boutique style, that's okay. Embrace it. You don't have to act big to look big, to try to, be something that you're not, to bring in clients, because eventually they're going to figure it out when they come to your office and it's just you, just you and a pair planner. They're like, where's everybody else? So, but that being said, it's okay to say you want to grow and be a large firm. That's okay too. I know some advisors that start solo and they grow firms and they lose clients over it because ultimately they wanted that advisor that they started working with. They wanted that relationship. But as you grow a practice, you will do less and less planning unless you go hire a CEO, which most advisors are not going to do. They didn't start a business to hand off the running the business part, even though many of them should. Topic for another day. So it is okay to be authentic and to be yourself. And so tell me, have you found sort of I don't know, sort of a niche clientele that you really work with, over the years? Is it really sort of still these executives that have these complex executive compensation tax situations, or have you found any other sort of areas of growth and new sources of new clients, if you will?
It has really evolved, and that's been very organic. And I really try to stop myself from picking my niche. I really let it come to me. So right now, almost all of my new clients are coming to me, honestly, from my church. So, I'm in Dallas, and we have lots of really huge churches here. So my church is big, but not too big. There's 1,100 families, and I've been involved there for a little over 15 years. I teach Sunday school. Right now, I teach our coming of age program, which is like that last year of children's religious education. So like if we were Jewish, it'd be like bat mitzvah or bar mitzvah, confirmation, that sort of thing. So I get to know a lot of the families really well. It also makes me fairly visible. So people get to know me, and, they know what I do. And it's been a very natural way for me to get clients. I'm Unitarian, and we're not always liberal people, but we have liberal religious views. There's a lot of social justice work that goes on in my church and in other Unitarian churches. So I'm able to work with more people who are concerned with the values they're living and what's happening in their world and how it affects the greater world. So, I've kind of had a specialty of working with women. Texas isn't the South, but it has sometimes some backwards ideas about women and money. And I do get a lot of female clients who just are so happy to be working with someone in the financial world who isn't condescending. Yeah, it is a problem we're still seeing here in 2018, but just that makes it a little easier. And then I've worked with a lot of same-sex couples over the years, which started really just when I was doing the executive work. And Texas, again, is a difficult place. We don't have any legal protections against discrimination for sexual orientation or gender identity here. So you have to keep that in mind when you're doing financial planning with people, because they can be fired for being gay.
Really?
Oh, yeah. So
I'm from the South, and that still shocks me one, that you could, and two, that anybody would, like anyone cares enough about that they would fire someone over it. It still blows my mind.
It doesn't happen at the big companies. It really doesn't. But, a same-sex couple relocates here to Dallas, and, more than likely one of the spouses is working for a big company, and the other one might go work for a smaller company or mid-sized company. And I've had to have serious talks with some of these spouses about you need to think about if you're going to be out in your workplace. So which is a really creepy conversation, but
yeah, that's really disappointing that you feel like you have to have that conversation, because from a financial standpoint, it does affect their personal finances if one of them is unable to keep a job. Because, now the flip side being, my thing is go tell everyone, because if you get fired, thank goodness, and go find a different job that embraces who you are. Because, I would like for us to all move away from having to hide who we are and who we love just because we think someone's, just because we know someone out there is backwards. But it does affect their personal finances. So it's worth having a conversation about, even if they choose to still be, who they are in the workplace.
Absolutely. So I mentioned my church is where a lot of these people were coming from. So in the Unitarian world, because the church has done so much with, marriage equality and equal rights and supporting gay, lesbian, transgender people, we have a lot of members there. So, and especially if they're looking for someone who's really comfortable with that world. My kids are growing up with their kids. My kids, because I've been going there long enough, I was pregnant and teaching Sunday school. So my kids never thought anything about their friends with two mommies or two daddies, because that's just their friends' parents. When you see something every day, you don't know it's different. My kids didn't know until they started public elementary school that some families judged that or had any view on that. I mean, who cares who the kids' parents are? So
yeah, kids don't know it's quote unquote different or weird until someone tells them it's weird, right? To them, it's just like they have a mom and they have another mom, and I'm divorced. And so my son has two moms now. He has a stepmom and his biological mom. And like, he doesn't think anything of it. He's just got three parents and like 8 grandparents, I think, because it's just, that's just who he is. And he doesn't think anything of it. And eventually someone's going to tell him it's weird and that, his parents are evil and we'll deal with that when we get there. But, that's just part of it. But to your point, like, that's awesome that the sort of those two, if you will, those two niche markets in a way have crossed over from, interacting with people at your church, but also that, you have a background working with same-sex couples. And so that you're meeting them at church, which is not likely in a lot of churches that, so that you would be meeting those couples. So that's awesome.
Yeah. So, and it's an easy way to prospect. And we have, when I enter these prospects into the CRM, because I'm a heavy user of my CRM, we have a couple tags to put on there to denote that I met them through church, because they're going to know me in a different way. They're going to make assumptions, and I think, good assumptions about what my values are and what my worldviews are based on the fact that they know me from church.
And, again, it's okay to work with people. It's not just about working with people that are like you, but working with people that have the same values as you do, I think is okay, and should be promoted that working with people that have the same social outlook is important, because if you have a client that's like super anti-gay marriage, it's just going to be hard for you to have a conversation with them, and to really be able to connect, I feel like. So I think it's awesome to be able to, we talk about niche in the professional demographic world, they are a doctor, they're a lawyer, but psychometric and just social outlook and not political, in that sense, but more of just like social stance that's a perfectly acceptable niche to be able to say, look, I work with people that want to use their money to impact the world or want to have a bigger impact on the world than just themselves through these various, organizations or ways. I think that's great.
Yeah. And so, and it does affect the financial planning. I mean, in the last 2 years, the amount that I talk about ESG and its impact on the investing world has just skyrocketed. And I love it. Clients bring it up all the time now, which is fantastic. But it's also, looking at what they're doing with their money, charitable giving, especially with the changes in the tax law and who's going to be itemizing and taking the standard deduction. And I kind of laughed every time I heard one of the financial planners in the media talking about how it was really going to impact the amount of charitable giving, because in my client base, I'm not seeing that. I'm, for the people who used to get the benefit because they were itemizing, and now they're going to be taking the standard deduction. And so that, tax benefit is going away. The people I work with, they really care about their impact on the world and about what their global neighbors, the lives they're living, and they want to make change. And so I'm not seeing any decrease in charitable giving, because the people I work with, they're coming at it. Yeah, it was great when they got that itemized deduction. Some people that I work with still, they give enough that they'll still be itemizing even with the increased standard deductions. But that need, that want to make an impact through your money, it is financial planning, but it does come from a place of what you value and what you're trying to do.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, but donate or, giving $1 to save 30 cents on taxes is not why people give. It'll be interesting to see. I don't guess I've ever seen these statistics on this. Maybe there's stats out there that people give more when there's a tax deduction, but I mean, that means they don't have a financial planner explaining to them how tax deductions work.
Right.
It's just not a money-making exercise. So that aside, but so Diana, as we're coming to a close with this episode, I'll ask you the final question, and that question being, if there was one piece of advice, one thing that you wish you could go back and tell your younger self, one thing you've learned over the years of owning your own business, what do you think that one piece of advice would be?
Oh my gosh. Ask questions, ask for help. Find your little village and the people who, you can turn to and say, I'm not sure what to do here. Like, you don't have to have the answer for everything. You have to know where to go get the answer. And I lost some opportunities because I just had that pride of I can figure this out for my practice by myself. And had I just asked, some of my friends in the financial planning world, it could have been a lot easier on me. And, people, your friends, the people that you surround yourself with generally want to help you. They want you to do well. So
it's true.
Yeah. So once I had a little more self-confidence and did ask a little bit more and ask for help and ask for other people's opinions, it all got a lot easier. So, but at the beginning, I didn't want, and I don't know who I thought was judging me because, more people are paying attention to themselves. They're not worrying about
right. No one's bothering to judge you.
Right. Like they got their own stuff they're dealing with. But, I was so worried about people not thinking that I could pull this off. And, and I didn't want to have that out there. So I just wasn't asking questions sooner. So I really think that people need to, obviously I think, XYPN is the place to be and to go, but there's so many organizations out there. Like, make the friends, make the contacts, and ask questions.
Absolutely. There are many homes. We are a home for a certain type of advisor. We have our own niche, and there are a lot of niches out there for advisors that aren't good for our tribe, but there are plenty of other tribes out there that are a better fit.
Oh, absolutely.
Well, thank you for that awesome advice. I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much for taking the time to come onto the show and share your career path and your wisdom and expertise. I really do appreciate it.
Oh, this was super fun. I appreciate the opportunity.
Missed calls or missed opportunities. Don't miss the chance to connect or bring on a new client. With Ruby, all your calls are answered live by a team of friendly, professional, remote receptionists, helping you win more clients and build trust. Let Ruby help you turn rings into relationships. For a special offer, visit callruby.com/XYPN and use promo code XYPN, or call them at 1-844-853-7829. Be sure to join our VIP community at xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP to hang out with other XYPN radio listeners, ask questions for future mailbag episodes with myself and Kitsis, and to finally find a community of like-minded financial advisors. Thanks so much for joining me today. We'll see you next time.
You're not alone, and you're not crazy. It's scary starting, building, and growing your own financial planning firm. And that's why we put together a free private community just for you, the Cutting Edge Financial Planner. Go to xyplanningnetwork.com/VIP or text XYPN Radio to 33344 and join a network of thousands ready to change the lives of Gen X and Gen Y clients.